Well, good morning. I am not Ann Thompson, but I'm Ted Jones, and I'm here to interview Ann Thompson. So we're delighted to have you, Ann, with the program this morning. You've been doing lots of interviews. About how many have you done so far?
I think we've done about 50.
About 50? Mm-hmm. Well...
And we try to call them conversations.
Conversations, okay.
Because we don't want anybody to feel like they're being interrogated.
I would never do that to you.
Oh, thank you.
All right. Well, tell us about where you were born and your schooling. Any information, anything you'd like to tell us about your early childhood.
Okay. I was born in Green Cove Springs, Florida, which is near Jacksonville on the St. Johns River. Well, actually, I was born in Jacksonville in the hospital, but I grew up in Green Cove Springs. And it was a great place to grow up, a beautiful town on the river, and at that time a small community. And as I got a little older, I didn't think that was so wonderful. But, you know, times have changed, and I feel small towns are wonderful again. I'm an only child. My mother was 49 and my dad was 30. No, my mother was 41 and my dad was 39 when I was born. And they met right after World War II. Okay. So I guess I'm fortunate to be here, because if they hadn't happened, I wouldn't be. But I went all the way through school in Green Cove Springs, graduated from Clay High School, which was the same high school my dad graduated from. And I was always, we were very active in our church, the Episcopal Church in Green Cove Springs. And a lot of my fond memories are doing things around our church life with the friends I made there, but also just going on my bike to visit my friends. And in the summer, we would meet. This town had a swimming pool that was built in the early 1900s, and we went there and spent most of our summer. If we didn't get rides to the beach, we spent our summer at the pool there, and it was a lot of fun growing up there.
Yeah, small towns are special. It's a part of Americana that we sometimes tend to forget. Did you have any special? Well, that was your special memory of your early years, was being able to bike and go swimming.
Go swimming, and I've always loved to read, so I read a lot as well. And
what's your favorite? What is your favorite genre of writing or reading?
I like historical fiction.
Okay. And
I like, I've read a lot of Christian authors, and I really like their works. And
okay.
So
what about after high school and then your career or careers?
I went to the Abraham Baldwin College in Tifton, Georgia for my first 2 years. And I was planning to then transfer back to Florida State. Okay. To finish my 4-year degree, and at that point I was majoring in home economics, and that was the reason I would have transferred back to FSU. But by then I was close to a lot of friends in college, and so I went to University of Georgia, and so I'm a Georgia Bulldog.
Oh my goodness!
Yes.
Oh my goodness!
Woof, woof.
That's in
Athens.
Athens. So, what was your first job?
My first job was I worked at Central State Hospital in Michigan, in Milledgeville, Georgia, which was the largest mental health facility in the world at that time.
Okay.
And that was at the era when most of the mental health facilities were being downsized. So my job was to help make placements for older people into the communities.
Transitioning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was probably my shortest professional employment. It was a wonderful experience. It set me up to know a lot about mental health issues through the years. Okay. But then I got engaged and moved back home to Jacksonville.
Okay. So where you and your spouse met in Jacksonville then?
Actually, we met when we were in high school.
In high school, okay.
We went to a church youth conference, and his twin brother introduced me to him, and I looked at the both of them and thought they were teasing because they looked no more alike or acted any more alike than any two human beings otherwise. But we dated off and on, but not until after college
Okay.
did we really
Okay.
start dating.
And so you have children?
I have 2 sons, Matthew and Luke.
Okay.
And people always ask me what happened to Matt and Mark and John, but they didn't come along.
And now you go to St. Luke's
No.
in Live Oak.
For my second time, I went to St. Luke's in Jacksonville as well.
Okay. And grandchildren.
I have 3. I have a granddaughter, Darcel, who will be 14 in November, and 2 grandchildren, Bria and Brody, and they will be 6 and 4 this year, right?
And they are a delight.
They are a
you.
delight,
Yeah.
and they live in Michigan, and Darcel and her family live in Kansas.
So how often do you see them? That's not a good question to ask right now.
No, not
in
now.
2020. But
Not often enough.
Yes.
No matter what the
yeah,
season.
Yeah, but you do get to see them when, hopefully, when things get better.
Yeah.
You'll be able to see them again.
Well, we're trying to meet part way this next week in camp, in a kind of a small campground, so we won't be too surrounded by other people.
When you moved back to Florida, that was from Georgia.
Georgia.
How did your career then take off and go?
I worked at first for the Department of Family and Children's Services in Jacksonville, which is a state agency. I worked there for about 13 years and did a variety of things, all in aging services. That's been my whole employment career. And now I've graduated to being an older adult. But during the time I was with the state of Florida, the latter part of the last 6 or 7 years, I worked in programs that were grant funded, and I had the responsibility of helping set those up and monitoring them in the 7 counties in our district. So I did a good bit of traveling with that, but it was all the programs like Meals on Wheels and services delivered to seniors at their home, and watched those programs grow and expand. And that was really interesting.
And then from there, where did you?
Well, from there, I then had 2 children.
Okay.
One who was still, he was about a year old, so I stopped working for a little while.
Okay.
Plus, my dad was very ill, and he lived with us.
Okay.
And so after my dad had died and we'd moved to Louisiana and back, I came back to Jacksonville. We moved back to Jacksonville, and I went to work for the Cathedral Foundation, which is a nonprofit corporation in Jacksonville that serves seniors, sponsored by the St. John's Cathedral there. Okay. And I was the administrator for their retirement community for 20 years.
What was interesting about that job in terms of being with the church agency and your own church?
Well, it was my first employment with a nonprofit, which I'd always felt really strongly about the services that are provided by nonprofit organizations. So I got to be a first-hand part of that. And we were able to bring in additional services through writing grants and improve the properties by doing that. And we were located in downtown Jacksonville. There were 3 high-rise buildings that were a part of our community. So the whole interaction of downtown Jacksonville with its revitalization at that point, getting involved in other parts of services in the area.
What years were those?
That was 1985 through 2006.
2006. Mm-hmm. Is the Cathedral Association still?
Yes.
It's still in existence?
It is.
All right.
Those buildings are now over 50 years old and have been maintained to serve seniors.
Now, do the seniors live in the high rises?
Yes.
They live in the high rises. So they have to use elevators.
Right. And it was really fun during the renovations. We did when you have no elevator or only one elevator.
Wow.
But just the variety of people I got to meet there, the opportunity of watching volunteers. I think one of the most rewarding parts of my time there was right after Hurricane Andrew in Homestead, Miami area. I remember one morning going into work and looking at the headlines of the paper, and there was this gentleman's picture. He was on a stretcher in the emergency room, and he had been dumped there by his family. And I went into a staff meeting and said, we have to do something about this. Well, it ended up several of us from the staff went down, and over the course of about a month and a half, spent about 12 or 15 days there, and ended up bringing about 40 people back to Jacksonville who needed homes.
Wow.
Whose homes were destroyed or their caregivers had abandoned them.
Wow.
and watching the volunteer effort that was made to equip all those apartments, and all the volunteer efforts that became a part of that.
Volunteers are the best part of any especially nonprofit.
Absolutely.
I know it is here at the village, and so we do depend on our volunteers.
And those were good times as well, because my children were growing up, and having been an only child, probably by the time I left the hospital with my first son, Matthew, I'd been around a baby more than the whole rest of my life put together. And I never knew that being a parent was going to be so exciting and so much fun. And then 7 years later, Luke came along.
Yeah.
And there was never a dull moment around.
Children never give us dull moments.
No, they don't. But they give us a lot of inspiration and a lot of reason for prayer, and luckily those have all turned out well. They're both doing well.
So when did you come to the village? Obviously, you came to be employed. Mm-hmm. And what was your first?
I came in 2006.
2006.
And my initial title at that point was Director of Residency Services.
Okay.
And I had known about the village for a number of years through our state professional association that the village was a member of, and my previous employer were members of. So I knew Jim Humbles, and I knew Dick Rillo, and a couple of other people who worked here that had come here from other retirement communities. And anytime you would see them, they would just talk about how much they loved this place. So after
and they still do.
Yes. And after my sons were out of college and deciding they weren't going to live back in Jacksonville, I thought, I'd like to do something different. Okay. And this has been a wonderful opportunity.
So then you became Vice President of Membership Services.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And you held that until just
last February, the end of last February, yeah.
Yes. So now you're one of us. You're a member of the village.
I'm delighted to be a member.
Yeah. What surprised you most about ACB since you've lived here?
I'll back up a second to answer that question.
That's fine.
All during the years that I had known about the village, and you don't think you know. I mean, you can't know something unless you're actually totally involved in it. Mm-hmm. But their mission and the fact that they have, through the generations, served people of all backgrounds and economic levels and interest, I just wasn't sure that it would be really that idyllic, and it is. And
it certainly is unique.
Because I know about a lot of other retirement communities around the country from having served on boards and things, but this is very unique in that its mission is really maintained.
It is what it says it is.
It is.
There's no cover up about that at all.
The other thing that surprised me, that as I became more involved, I came to work and started, knowing people and knowing a little bit about their backgrounds, how many people have such intertwined long-term backgrounds, from college to the church they grew up in, or where their father pastored, or, just, it's amazing to me. And then other people who just didn't even know that somebody lived here, and they moved here and found long-time friendships. Yeah. So.
Do you have any special interests, hobbies, things you enjoy doing in your retirement now years?
Well, I enjoy travel, and I hope to get to do more of that after the next year or so. I've taken a few trips that were really, had been on my bucket list a long time, and I'm really glad I got to do that. One was about 4 years ago, a trip to Ireland, where I spent 2 weeks and lived in a house on a little island for a week.
Well, tell us about that a little bit.
Oh, that was really fun.
In relationship, was it Southern Ireland? I mean, Ireland.
Yeah, right off
Ireland, the Republic of Ireland.
Mm-hmm, right off the coast of Cork.
Okay.
Someone I know has a home there, and she from time to time would put it up for auction at the church auction. So a friend and I bid on the week on the island.
How about that?
And you could only get there by ferry.
Okay.
And we felt like, we'll just take trips every day. We loved it so much we never left the island for the whole week we were there. But I got to go with 5 other friends, longtime friends, and it was just great.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful.
And then the trip I'm not going to get to take this year is to the Passion Play in Germany.
Oh,
And they have postponed it, which is only every 10 years. So hopefully in 2022.
I can barely say it. Oberammergau, but
I couldn't,
guess,
so I'm glad
yeah.
you did. So that's what I'm looking
we
forward
had
to.
taken a look at that too, but it's not going to be possible. I was going to ask about your trips to Cuba. You've taken several with St. Luke's, and
St. Luke's Episcopal Church has had a long-term sister church relationship with a church in Cuba, in Matanzas, Cuba. And so I've been 3 times, and it has just been amazing getting to know the people there in the church and watching them grow with our ability to help them somewhat financially, because in Cuba you can't buy much. I mean, and you don't have money. So we've been able to help them get materials to renovate their church and put in a water purification system.
you
And
also send medicine. You also
yes.
bring medicines. Medicines that you can bring.
Right. A big part of the reason for going is to be able to take things into them that they can't get otherwise.
Yeah.
But now we're able to communicate with them through Facebook
Okay.
and some email, and that's been something that wasn't even possible the first time I went.
Yeah.
But I've always had an interest in the Cuban people and the Cuban history. I've worked a number of years with different people who had to come to this country from Cuba. And
You've also served various offices at your church.
right now we are in the process of getting a new priest, and so I'm on the search committee for that.
Okay. Have you found any way to volunteer now in the village in terms of your volunteer time in the village itself?
This is one of my ways of volunteering,
Well,
not just being interviewed. The front porch conversations were something I'd always wanted to have. Well, I didn't know what we were going to call them.
Yeah.
But I'd always wanted that to be a part of TV too, and for people to get to know each other better at the village. And after, a couple of months of retirement, I thought, well, let me go talk to James about that, because that's something I always wanted to do. And by then we knew that Tom Peaks was here, and he was able to film and record and edit and make it all possible. So thanks to him, we're able to do that.
thanks, Tom.
And now we have another
And
person, Donald Wrigley,
Don.
helping. So
Don Jr.
Don Jr. And I think that if I could say that there's some important part of my life, it's been on porches through the years. And I just, people share and talk, and, it's just a great time. And it was a part of my growing up. Every afternoon when my parents got home from work, we would sit and have iced tea on the porch, no matter what the weather was. And
I had a grandmother that used to sit out on the porch. That was her favorite spot.
I did too.
And Grandma would tell us lots of stories. Have you had an experience that you would consider life-changing, that really changed direction or impressed you in some way that...
I grew up in the Episcopal Church, going to church all the time, active in youth group, and some youth group activities were a part of that. I went to summer camp at Camp Weed, which was not where it is now. It was over on the Gulf. And to me, that was the early part of my foundation, Christian foundation, through home and growing up. But as I got old, got to be an adult and began raising children, probably one of the biggest impacts on me was attending a weekend called Cursillo.
Okay.
And I think in the Methodist Church you have Walk to Emmaus, which is very similar. And Cursillo really means a short course in Christianity. But what it did for me is help me know more about the tools and the practices and the importance of being in community with others.
Yeah, we took off our watches. They wouldn't let us have a watch, so you could not be constantly looking at your watch. So it's really an intensive. I think ours was Thursday through Sunday.
Ours was.
And
too.
then Sunday was kind of a commitment service to renew again your life commitment.
And the lessons I learned there have helped me through some harder times in my life, and I'm really grateful for that.
Well, the Christian experience is always evolving.
That's right.
Yes. Do you have a bucket list that you've been keeping, or things that you want to do? You've alluded to that already.
Mm-hmm. Getting to go to Germany in 2022 would be one, to the Passion Play. Just seeing more of this country, spending more time with family. My yard looks a lot better. That was one of the things. And I've really enjoyed gardening. And I joined the Village Garden Club almost at the end of the growing season, so I look forward to fall and planting again. Okay. But just the opportunity to be available to help people, and that's important to me. And
tell us a little bit more how you were introduced to the village. I know you said that you were introduced, you had met both Jim.
We would have district meetings for the Florida Association of Homes for Aging, and several times they were here. But my very first experience was a women's group at our church came to Camp Swanee for a retreat.
Okay.
And we got here late at night, so I never really knew where I was until we were leaving. And to look back to think, well, that was my first experience here.
Yeah. So then that's when you began to explore.
Mm-hmm. Okay. After being involved with the state
Did they come
association.
after you, or did you just apply?
I came looking.
Okay.
And I remember talking to Jim Humbles on the phone. He goes, Ann, do you know where Advent Christian Village is? I think he couldn't picture me living in a small town or at the village. And I said, Jim, if you remember, I've been there a few times. He said, oh, okay, just wanted to be sure.
Well, I'm glad they found you, and I'm glad you found us.
Likewise.
You've certainly added a very joyful dimension to our journey here.
Well, I think to me one of the greatest parts of the village, there's so many, but it's just the beautiful setting. And that's one thing I really like, is the outdoors. Not in August and July in Florida, but anyway. But it is, and that's one of the things I always encourage people to do, is to take time to get out and explore nature. We have beautiful parks around us.
And the morning is rather cool this morning.
Yes, it's
raining gently, and we can see the Swanee from here. Mm-hmm. So it's a wonderful place.
It is.
Well, we would like to just say how much we have appreciated interviewing you today. We thank you for your support of the village in terms of your employment. You gave your heart to it. I know that.
Thank you.
From what I have seen from you. And now these front porch conversations are bringing us all a little closer together. And
I look forward to the opportunity when we can all be together again.
Yeah. Well, may God bless you in the next 50 interviews. And when you hit 100, maybe we'll have a celebration.
That would be fun, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would be. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for continuing to watch. We want to tell you a little bit more about how Front Porch Conversations got started, and for you to see the two people who helped make this possible behind the cameras, Tom Peaks and Donald Wrigley. And thank you so much. In the interview, Ted talked to me about how I had the idea of doing this, and I'm thinking back, our porches have been a very important part of my life. And started from when I was a small child and would go to my grandmother's home that was built in 1880, and her house wasn't huge, but there were 3 porches, and each porch served a different purpose. And I thought that came to me after thinking about it. I wrote an article a few years ago for Village Voices about porches. But my grandmother's house had a small front porch, and that's where she greeted visitors. And then there was a side porch that was from the barn up to the house, and that's where she always said she waited for family to come home or to spend time with family. And the third porch was on the back of the house, and that's where the pitcher pump was. And I remember many times shelling peas on that porch and cracking pecans with her. And so that porch is my grandmother and our time together that was really special to me. After I retired, I thought about what I wanted to do as a volunteer, and I just wanted to be able to stay in touch with people here at the village and get to know new people as they moved in. So that was one of the ideas. So I talked to James Sutter and said, I'd really like to do this, but I don't know much about technology. And he said, I have just the person for you to talk to, and that's Tom Peaks. Tom, tell us about where we went from there.
Okay, James talked to me and asked me if I'd be interested in doing this. And I said, oh my gosh, yes. That's just a fantastic project for us to go on. And so Ann and I started talking, throwing ideas back and forth. And I'm laying in bed one night, and I'm thinking about how this is going to work. And I started thinking about my grandparents' houses. Now, my grandparents were farmers, and they lived in cracker houses. And cracker houses all had porches. And I remembered the conversations on these porches. And these conversations were very significant to me in my formative years. So a God thing happened, and he said, front porch conversation. And I told Ann, I said, what do you think about it? Great. And so it's been a learning process for everybody involved with this. And more so me than anything else, because a problem would present itself and I'd be sitting there at the computer and God would answer that problem and show me how to do it. So it really is a God thing, believe it or not.
It's a good village word.
Anyway, so we're doing the interview with Don and Penny, and afterwards, the interview, I asked Don if he would be interested in learning this. And he said, I don't know. I said, well, why don't you come over and watch me edit your interview? And he did. And obviously he fell in love with it. Because according to Penny, I created a monster.
Yeah.
And he has brought a lot to the game. He's given us some fantastic ideas. And so we're real happy to welcome Don on board. And now I'll turn it over to Don and let him give you.
Yeah, he says, I've come up with ideas. I guess I consider myself the idea person. I've been many times that said, Tom, this is what I want to see happen. And I'll voice it. And I said, can we do that? He'll sit there for a minute and says, yeah, we can make that happen. And so it's been an interesting partnership on Front Porch Conversation, and we found ourselves doing some other projects as well and moving forward. And,
Why don't you share a little bit about those?
The biggest one, and this would be have been my idea, is the midweek devotion and it will start airing on TV2 soon.
And what I want to ask each of you to do is think about other things that you might like to see on TV2, or other projects or other ideas for how we can use these interviews. As we've gone, we've figured out, well, giving somebody a copy is a great way to share this with their family and friends. It's going to be there on YouTube. And we hope that this becomes a part of other people's family legacy as well. And that reminds me that it's just something we all should take some time to do, is to prepare either written or recorded family stories to share with family members. And that's a way you can help future generations know what it was like for you or your ancestors as well.